You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode, we're reviewing the fourth test of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy between Australia and India. What a test match we have witnessed at the MCG. It went down to the last day, final hour, and the final session on day 5 in front of a record crowd of 373,691 across the 5 days. And Australia produced one of their remarkable test match wins and are within touching distance of reclaiming the Border-Gavaskar Trophy for the first time since 2014-15. For India, it was a disappointing result and now are on the back foot to retain the Border-Gavaskar Trophy, going 2-1 down in this test match. Despite that, and despite the outcome of this test match, they had some good performances. Kumar Reddy's 100 in the first innings was superb. Bumrah's bowling performance in the second innings was superb as well. And Jaiswal played some pretty good innings across the 2 innings of this test match for India. So India will be very disappointed. It was a test match for them to draw. Unfortunately, they weren't good enough. They succumbed to the pressure, and Australia were able to get the job done and now lead the series 2-1 going into Sydney. This test match had it all. So many momentum shifts. One side was ahead, the other side came back. We saw some great performances with the bat, with the ball. And, you know, this test match was probably one of the best test matches I've seen in recent memory. Certainly up there between Australia and India in terms of the great test matches that were played against these two countries over the years. And I think people watching, whether you were at the ground at the MCG, witnessing this test match, or watching at home or listening on the radio, you would say probably the same thing. It was a remarkable test match, and the way that Australia got the job done is just more satisfying for them, knowing that we're 2-1 up in the series. Whatever happens in Sydney, if we win there, the series is done. If it rains in Sydney, which is always the case this time of year in January, then Australia still win the series anyway and retain the Border-Gavaskar Trophy. So this test match was so critical in the outcome of this series that Australia now have the advantage going into Sydney. So there were plenty of moments, plenty of things to talk about from this fourth test match of this series between Australia and India. This series has ebbed and flowed. It's been captivating. It's been enthralling cricket. You can't take your eyes off it. And every test match has been played in a way that has made it captivating. And, you know, you can't take your eyes off it, really. And that was the case here in Melbourne for this fourth test of the series. And Australia, as I mentioned earlier, probably one of their greatest wins in Test cricket. They've had a few great wins over the years, Australia, but this is probably well up there in the list, the way that they went about it. And for India, disappointment, as I mentioned, as well early on. They'll be disappointed with the result, you know, going 2-1 down. They're really on the back foot. So plenty to talk about and discuss in today's episode of this review of the fourth test. Plenty of things happened across the 5 days, which we'll talk about, no doubt. But first of all, let's remind ourselves about how this test match went down in terms of how both teams went about it with the bat in terms of scoring runs. So let's have a look at the match summary and just remind ourselves of what happened across the 5 days, really. Australia batted first. 474 was a good score in the first innings. Steve Smith, back-to-back hundreds, following the 100 in Brisbane. Got 100 here in Melbourne. His 34th Test 100, top scored with 140. And Jasprit Bumrah, not a surprise, leading the way again for India with the ball, taking 4 wickets in that first innings for India. India, in response, in their first innings, were all out for 369. A very impressive 100 from Kumar Reddy, 114 he top scored with. And also was a proud moment for him, scoring his first Test century. And what a way to do it at the MCG. Scott Boland, Pat Cummins led the way with Australia with the ball in that first innings, taking 3 wickets each. In the second innings, Australia all out for 234. Marnus Labuschagne top scored with 70. Not a surprise again. Jasper Bumrah leading the way for India, taking 5 wickets, another 5-wicket haul for him in the series for India there. India needed 340 runs to win. They were bowled out for 155 in 79.1 overs. Jaiswal top scored with 84. And Pat Cummins and Scott Boland again leading the way for Australia in the second innings with the ball, taking 3 wickets each. Australia won by 184 runs, and Pat Cummins was named player of the match, rightly so. He had a great Test match, Pat. Scored runs, took wickets, and rightly named the player of the match. So that's pretty much what happened across the 5 days of this 4th Test, I should say, at the MCG. And what a Test match it was, as I mentioned earlier. An extraordinary Test match, that's for sure. There were some critical moments and key moments in this Test match, and so many key moments and so many pivotal moments that swung the Test match one way and the other. Some of those key moments that really had a deciding factor in this Test match was, Jasper Bumrah's 3 for 4. He took 3 for 4 in the second innings in that batting collapse that Australia had, where they lost 4 for 11 in 21 balls. Australia was 6 for 91. The lead was 196. So that bowling performance from Bumrah was getting India back into the Test match. And it could have been a different result. If Australia were bowled out cheaply, India probably chasing something over 200, could have been a different result in the end. And that was a pivotal moment in the Test match. Bumrah, his spell, he was a man possessed. It was an incredible spell of bowling to drag India back, as he has so often done in the series, leading the way, not having much bowling support. Just an incredible performance by him. But Pat Cummins, Marnus Labuschagne, that partnership for the 7th wicket, 57 in the second innings, along with, Nathan Lyon, Scott Boland, 61 for the 10th wicket, rescued Australia in that second innings. So from 6 for 91, all out for 234. They got the lead up to 339, so India needed 340 runs to win. And after that batting collapse where they lost 4 for 11, the top order, crumbling to Bumrah yet again in the series. Not a surprise to see the top order crumble yet again to Bumrah in the series. It's been a common pattern and theme. But for those partnerships, Cummins and Labuschagne, Lyon and Boland, pretty much got Australia back on track to really put the game back into their favour and got themselves out of a hole, Australia there. But I think the most pivotal moment in this Test match was the Rishabh Pant dismissal in the second innings. And Travis Head coming on to bowling a long hop, pretty much. Rishabh Pant took the bait. He fell for the trap, hit it straight up in the air, and a brilliant catch by Mitchell Marsh at deep long on. That pretty much sparked India's batting collapse on day 5 in that last session. India then went on to lose 7 for 34 in 28.3 overs, and Australia won the Test match. And that's where the game turned. Rishabh Pant was batting so well with Jaiswal. The second session of day 5, they went wicketless, Australia, and that partnership was getting the game into that territory of being a draw. And then obviously India opened the door for Australia. Rishabh Pant couldn't help himself, and Travis Head got the breakthrough, and that really pretty much sewn up the Test match in Australia's favour and caused that batting collapse. And that was the most pivotal moment of this Test match. And there were so many moments that turned the game one way or the other. But that moment there with Rishabh Pant losing his head for a minute there pretty much turned the Test match in Australia's favour. So those 3 key moments, did have a say in this Test match and how this Test match went down. And but the last one with Pant being dismissed was the pivotal moment in this Test match, and that's where it turned. And we'll talk about Richard Part, and India's performance a bit later on in this episode. But it wasn't his finest hour, let's just put it that way. But so many key moments and so many key factors in this fourth test of this Border-Gavaskar Trophy between Australia and India from the MCG. Let's move on and talk about Australia's performance in this fourth test match of the series here from the MCG for Boxing Day. Let's talk about their performance with bat and ball and how they went about their business. What a test match for Australia. What a victory. They had to fight hard for this victory after being denied in Brisbane, where the rain, the weather played a part in Brisbane. The game ended in a draw there. Australia were looking good in Brisbane. They were hoping for a 2-1 lead going into Melbourne. That wasn't the case. But to come out here in Melbourne, to play the way they did, to win the test match the way they did on the last day was a superb victory. And they lead 2-1 in the series and, are in prime position, pole position, to reclaim the Border-Gavaskar Trophy for the first time in 10 years. And it was a superb victory. Everyone played their part, the batters, the bowlers, everyone played their part in winning this test match. So it was a great team effort overall, it has to be said. Now let's talk about the batting performance. 474 they scored in the first innings. That set up Australia nicely in the first innings. Whenever you score over 450 plus in the first innings of a test match, you're in a good position. And Australia was set up nicely, largely thanks to another Steve Smith 100, his 34th test match, 100, 140. He got in the end, Steve Smith. That was a superb innings from him. Also a good partnership between Smith and Cummins of 112 for the 7th wicket. Pat Cummins batted well for his 49. Should have got a half century. And also top order runs. For the first time in the series, the top three scored 50s. Khawaja, Labuschagne, and Constas on debut, obviously. We'll talk about Sam Constas in a moment. But all of them contributing, and Australia were able to get that score of 474 in the first innings. Now, in the second innings, got into a bit of trouble, Australia, in the second innings. They had a handy 105-run lead going into the second innings, which was a pretty handy lead. Whenever you lead by 100 runs going into the second innings is a pretty good result. So 105-run lead in the second innings Australia had. They were in a bit of trouble. As we mentioned a bit earlier, the batting collapsed. They lost 4 for 11 in 21 balls. Jasper Bumrah took 3 of the wickets in that batting collapse. He got 3 for 4 in that little spell. Australia 6 for 91. They had a lead of just 196. So the test match could have been a lot different if Australia were bowled out cheaply at that stage. But as we saw in this test match, key innings and key partnerships for Australia in this second innings. Marnus Labuschagne stood up. Good partnership with Pat Cummins, 57 for the 7th wicket. And then you had a brilliant 10th wicket partnership between Nathan Lyon and Scott Boland. They added 61 between them, and Australia were able to get up to a lead of 339 to set India 340 runs to win. So those partnerships and those innings played by Labuschagne, Cummins, Lyon and Boland were very critical for Australia in terms of setting up this test match win for Australia. And it could have been a lot different if those partnerships didn't happen. But in the end, they did, and Australia fought their way back superbly. Now, in terms of talking points for Australia's batting, we'll start with Steve Smith. I thought he was superb in this test match, 34th test match, 100. What else can we say about Steve Smith? He always finds a way to score runs. And going into this series, he was under pressure. There was question marks about, when will he retire? Will he continue on? Has he lost the desire and fight? Well, that certainly hasn't been the case. What we saw in Brisbane was a scratchy innings from Steve Smith. Wasn't at his fluent best, but he scored 100, and that's the main thing. But then going into Melbourne, he looked at his absolute best. You wouldn't say he was the old Steve Smith of old, obviously, because he is a different player than he once was. But compared to the 100 in Brisbane to this one in Melbourne, certainly a lot better. Nearly approaching 10,000 test runs as well, leading the way, scoring runs. Steve Smith, it's great to see. And just played at his absolute best, really. He certainly rises for the big occasions. Boxing Day, big occasion. you want to make a statement, and he certainly did that. And good to see Steve Smith back into the runs. Hopefully, he can tick over the 10,000 test run mark, join Ricky Ponting, Alan Border, Steve Waugh as the other Australian cricketers to score 10,000 test runs in test cricket. Hopefully, Steve Smith can do that at the SCG for the last test of the series. To do that at his home ground will be a proud moment nonetheless. And a superb performance by Steve Smith as well with the bat in terms of scoring these valuable runs in this test match. His innings pretty much set up Australia to be in a good position, especially in the first innings. Marnus Labuschagne, back-to-back 50s in this test match, just like Steve Smith, struggling early on in the series, but Labuschagne just starting to get back into the groove of scoring runs again. Back-to-back 70s in this test match, but the second innings was crucial. The top order collapsed. Obviously, Constance went early, Khawaja, then Smith, Travis Head, Mitchell Marsh, and then Carey. So a batting collapse there for Australia, losing wickets at a quick rate. Bumrah was on one of those spells. For Labuschagne to stand up in the way he did, I think for Marnus, if he looks back on this series, I think he'll say this innings here in Melbourne, the second innings here, was probably the most important innings he probably played in the entire series. Certainly series defining. The partnership he had with Pat Cummins was key as well in terms of Australia getting towards that lead of 339. And then obviously Nathan Lyon and Scott Boland did the rest with that 10th wicket partnership, which got Australia up to that 339 lead to set India 340 to win. So for Marnus, not at his absolute best. There was a lot of plays and misses in his innings. He got hit on the body a few times, but he toughed it out and he was able to score these important runs. So for Marnus, he's just starting to get back into the runs again. Hopefully he can score a big score in Sydney. Hopefully he can get to that 100 mark. But I think for Marnus, in terms of setting up this test match for Australia, in terms of Australia winning this test match, I think both of his innings and both innings were crucial. But the second innings was very important in terms of Australia winning this test match. Usman Khawaja, first 50 of the series. He's been low on runs. There's been a lot of pressure on Khawaja. But in the second innings, he looked a little bit all over the place. He got out to Siraj in the end. He got out to him bowled in the second innings for 21. But in the first innings, he looked pretty good, opening the batting with Sam Constas. And I think Sam's exuberance of youth sort of rubbed off on Usman Khawaja and probably rubbed off on the rest of the Australian batting lineup, to be honest. That really got Khawaja going, and he was able to score runs freely. First 50 of the series for Khawaja, very important 50 in terms of the foundation and the base that he set with Sam Constas. Both of them added 89 for the first wicket in that first innings, which really set up Australia in terms of them going to that 474 score in the first innings. So Khawaja just starting to get back into the rhythm of scoring runs again. Hopefully he can get another big score at the SCG, certainly to keep the pressure off his back. Sam Constas. Let's talk about Sam. What a debut for Sam Constas. A lot talked about the kid. He's 19 years old. He's the youngest Australian Test cricketer that we've had since Pat Cummins debuted in 2011 against South Africa. What an innings from Sam. The first innings, 60 off 65. Missed out in the second innings, obviously. But the first innings was unreal. Watching it myself, seeing Constas ramp or lap Bumrah for 4 and 6 was pretty remarkable to watch, really. And for him to come into the side, big occasion, Boxing Day, 19-year-old kid, you're on Test debut, you're in front of a big crowd of over nearly 100,000 or so people. To do what he did was pretty remarkable for a 19-year-old. I think many 19-year-old kids will be overawed by the situation, but not Sam. He was pretty determined. He wanted to face the first ball of the innings. He sprinted out to the middle. He was enthusiastic. He was lapping everything up, which is great to see. Now, I know a lot of people have made comments about Sam saying, oh, this innings was a bit lucky and he got away with a few things. Well, you need a bit of luck in cricket. Anyone who's played cricket, and especially as a batter, you need luck. And you need luck to go your way. And Sam had a bit of luck in the first innings. And we've got to remember he's 19 years old. You know, he has a little bit of naivety about him. But he's 19 years old. He's learning his craft. He's learning how to play this game of cricket. The kid's got talent. You can see that. The more experience he'll gain, the more he will be better for it going forward. But I thought he handled it pretty well. He was engaged with the crowd. He wanted to be a part of this great atmosphere. He was soaking everything up, and he was having fun. And that's what you expect from a 19-year-old kid. You know, he was up and about in the field. He was up and about when he was batting. He was engaged with the crowd, as I mentioned. And it was great to see that from Sam. And great to see that he wasn't overawed by the situation. So I think hopefully for Sam going forward in his career, there's a few areas for him to work on, of course. But let's just bear in mind, he's 19 years old. He's going to be around for a very long time. But Australia, the reason they selected him for this test match and obviously dropped McSweeney is because they wanted that point of difference. They wanted someone to take it up to Bumrah and to get the scoring going, especially in those early overs for Australia. And that's what he did. He took it on. You know, he wasn't overawed by Bumrah. He lapped him. He got him away for a few boundaries when he was playing those lap shots or ramps. And Bumrah had no answers. And India didn't have any answers either. India were unsure of how to bowl to him, what sort of fields they wanted to set to him. They were unsure. They just lost the plot a little bit on that first day of this test match. And they didn't know what to do with Sam because he was playing these shots and India looked a little bit rattled. So that's what Australia wanted Sam Constas to do, and he certainly did that. You know, he's got a bright future ahead. You know, he's going to get many opportunities to play for Australia. But it was great to see a 19-year-old kid do what he did. It's quite refreshing, and I think that really benefited Australia. I think it benefited the batting group, I should say. You know, it certainly rubbed up on Khawaja. He scored that half century. It rubbed off on Labuschagne and Smith in the way that they went about their business. So it was a positive, and it was great to see that for Australia, and great to see that from Sam Constas. And hopefully we can see many more of his batting talents in the next test in Sydney. But the first innings, you know, he's got something about him. And let's just bear in mind, he's only 19 years old. He's learning his craft. And let's just let the kid enjoy his cricket. You know, he's having the best time of his life. And that's fantastic to see. Mitchell Marsh, yet again, another batting failure for Mitchell Marsh. That is a concern. He's another talking point from this test match for Australia with the batting side of things. Both dismissals in both innings were pretty ordinary and pretty poor. He hasn't been bowling much either. He only bowled 10 overs combined in this test match again. Not really bowling as much overs as he would like. Not scoring the runs as well, Mitchell Marsh. So that's a question mark going forward for him. He hasn't had the best of years in 2024. Hopefully going into Sydney, if he does play, hopefully 2025 will bring him some form and obviously get back into the runs. But that was another talking point. A rarity from Travis Head. Now, we haven't seen Travis Head fail in both innings of a test match for a very long time, but he made a duck and got out for one in the second innings, both to Bumrah, obviously. The first innings, he left alone a ball from Bumrah, which collected his off stump. And then in the second innings, he flicked it straight to Kumar Reddy at square leg off Bumrah and fell for the trap that was set there from India because they packed the leg side field. So a bit of a rarity with the bat from Travis Head, a bit of a failure in this test match. But I think we can let Travis Head off a bit there, I think, because he's had a pretty good series up until this point. So hopefully he'll back in the runs in Sydney. But a bit of a failure there for Travis Head. But I suppose in a positive way for Australia that others stood up. Constas, Khawaja, Labuschagne, Smith, even down the order as well. Pat Cummins and the tail enders, they stood up. So Australia won the test match without Travis Head's input with the bat. So I suppose that's a positive. Before this test match, it was all Travis Head or nothing. So that I suppose that's a positive for Australia, that others stood up when Travis Head failed in both innings. So I suppose that's a positive as well. So Australia's batting overall was pretty good. Good signs at the top order of scoring some runs. Obviously, the second innings was a bit of a different story, but the first innings, good to see the top three score 50s, and obviously Smith scored that big 100. The tail enders contributing, Pat Cummins in both innings, and obviously Lyon and Scott Boland in the second innings as well. Pretty good output with the bat in this test match for Australia. I think they'll be pleased that they were able to score over 400 runs again for the second time in the series, following the 400 total that they got in Brisbane in the first innings there, 445 in Brisbane, 474 here in Melbourne. So that's a good sign that they're scoring big runs in the first innings, and in both test matches really put India under pressure. So plenty of positives for the batting group. The negatives, obviously Mitchell Marsh's failure with the bat again. The batting collapse, had another batting collapse again. So those are a couple of negatives that they need to address going into the next test in Sydney. But apart from that, the batting group stood up and were able to provide some fight and score runs at the crucial times in this test match, which is a real positive. Now let's move on and talk about the bowling performance for Australia. And I think the Australian bowlers bowled superbly. It was a very tough pitch here at the MCG. Didn't really break up as much. We did see some variable bounce at times, especially on the last day. We saw a bit of spin, not much. There was a bit of swing and seam movement as well. But pretty much the pitch was pretty good for batting. And the Australian bowlers in both innings toiled hard for their wickets, especially in the second innings. They had to work hard for the 10 wickets, but they were able to get the job done. Bowled India out for 369 in the first innings, which was a good result. They gained a 105-run lead in the process. They struggled on a pitch that did flatten out in that Indian innings in the first innings. Kumar Reddy, Sundur added 127 for the 8th wicket. That partnership pretty much made it hard for Australia to get through the Indian batting lineup, but they were able to get the job done at the end. And in the second innings, this was a superb bowling performance. Defending 340 in the second innings. The time factor was against them, obviously. Taking 10 wickets in 3 sessions was always going to be a difficult task on a pitch that wasn't really breaking up as much, but they were able to get the job done. They took 3 early wickets in the first session. On day 5, Rohit Sharma, KL Rahul falling to Pat Cummins in the same over. And then obviously Mitchell Starc getting rid of Virat Kohli just before lunch. India 3 for 33 at lunch. That pretty much decided where India were going to go in terms of chasing the runs down. It pretty much reaffirmed to India that, you know what, we didn't get off to the start that we wanted to. Let's just, shut up shop and basically play for the draw. And that's what happened. The second session, Australia went wicketless. The Pant and Jaiswal partnership held off Australia pretty well in the second session. I don't think Australia bowled pretty badly in the second session. They toiled hard, but Pant and Jaiswal resisted very well. India, 3 for 112 at tea. That partnership was 88 for the 4th wicket between Pant and Jaiswal. And then the last session, that's where it all happened. And that's where the test match turned in Australia's favour. And Travis Head didn't do much with the bat. Travis Head didn't score any runs, but he was a pivotal bowler, Travis Head, and he took the key wicket of Rishabh Pant. Rishabh Pant took on the long hop that Travis Head bowled. India went on to lose 7 for 34 after that wicket fell of Pant in 28.3 overs. Australia won the test match, obviously, and it was a great win. And that's where the test match pretty much was in favour of Australia. And that's how the test match ended up being Australia's win, really, in the end, is because of that Travis Head wicket off Rishabh Pant. And that's where it turned. And obviously, Australia pretty good in the field. They caught everything. And that was the difference, obviously. India in their innings, in the second innings, dropped a few catches. Jaiswal dropped a few catches. But Australia in the second innings here of this test match, they caught everything. Steve Smith was superb at slip again, catching a few balls off Nathan Lyon and the quicks at slip. The catching overall was pretty good, and the fielding was pretty good as well from Australia. And that was the difference in terms of building that pressure and getting those wickets. They were able to pick up the 10 wickets and do that. Talking points with Australia's bowling. Well, Pat Cummins, what can you say about him? Led the way again with bat and ball in this test match, but got key wickets, especially in the second innings. He got rid of Rohit Sharma and Rahul in the same over. And then he got the big wicket of Jaiswal, obviously creating a lot of controversy whether or not Jaiswal hit the ball or not. Nothing on Snicko. Obviously, at the end of the day, we are going to have these discussions in the game of cricket because we know technology is not 100% perfect. But that was a key moment as well in the test match. Jaiswal was batting so well. Pat Cummins came on, bowled a short ball down leg side. Jaiswal couldn't help himself. Wanted to try and hook it down a fine leg for a 6 and got a bit of bat on it. And on the replays, it did show a bit of a deflection on the replays there. But a lot of discussion about that in terms of that process with the DRS. But that's what Pat Cummins does. He comes on, picks up key wickets, and those 3 wickets he picked up were very important. Obviously, Rohit Sharma in his batting form at the moment. Rahul, we know what he can do. He's batted pretty well in the series. He was a big wicket. And then obviously Jaiswal, the way he was batting, that was a key wicket for Australia as well. So Pat Cummins yet again leading the way. Mitchell Starc, I thought he bowled superbly in the second innings. He could have got more wickets than he did, but 1 for 25 and 16 overs. He got the key wicket of Virat Kohli just before lunch. It was a brilliant setup that Mitchell Starc did to Kohli, and then he threw. Brilliant setup from Starc to get rid of Virat Kohli. And then he finally bowled the one just wide outside off stump, tempting Kohli into the cover drive and got the outside edge. And yet again, Virat Kohli falling the same way as he has done throughout the whole entire series. And that was a big wicket in the context of the test match. And Mitchell Starc battling through the pain. There is some discomfort with his back, something there that's really bothering him. But he pushed through the pain and he was able to get the key wicket of Kohli, which is important in the context of the test match for Australia. Scott Boland was superb again. What can you say about Scott Boland? 6 wickets in both innings. He made some crucial runs in the second innings. Obviously, a brilliant 10th wicket partnership with Nathan Lyon, as we've already discussed. But he was superb again, Scott Boland, especially in the second innings. He got key wickets when Australia needed it. He got rid of Jadeja. He got rid of Deep. He got rid of Bumrah. Key wickets for Australia in terms of winning this test match. And what can you say about Scott Boland? He loves bowling at the MCG and, definitely put on a show, that's for sure, with his bowling. Nathan Lyon did well, took 5 wickets across the 2 innings. He didn't really have much to work with because the pitch didn't really break up as much. Not really much turn there for the spinners, but he got key wickets. He obviously picked up Siraj as the last wicket, LBW plumb in front for the last wicket. And it was a brilliant celebration from Nathan Lyon and the team when that last wicket fell. And he was able to pick up 2 crucial wickets in the second innings. Obviously, he picked up Siraj for the last wicket of the test match, but he also picked up Kumar Reddy, which was a key wicket as well, and a brilliant catch from Steve Smith at slip for Nathan Lyon there to pick up his 2 wickets. So the Australian bowlers did pretty well. Obviously, Travis Head picking up the key wicket of Rishabh Pant really sparked the batting collapse, and that's where the game turned in Australia's favour. So I thought Australia in that second innings bowled superbly. I think the first session was absolutely wonderful bowling, kept the pressure on India, didn't really leak too many runs. They weren't really scoring much runs there in that first session, India. And that really put the pressure on them to try and win this test match. Obviously, chasing 340 on the last day was always going to be difficult anyway. But the way that Australia went about it with the bowling side of things, if they could put pressure on India in that first session, take a few wickets, limit the scoring, then wickets will come. And that's what happened. And as we got towards the end of the day, the test match turned on its head. So I think Australia will be very buoyant by their bowling performance. And I think they should be, because it was another great bowling performance again. So the other talking point about Australia's bowling is Mitchell Marsh. Obviously, we've mentioned it before and time again with Mitchell Marsh in the series. hasn't really bowled much. He only bowled 3 overs in the second innings. He bowled 7 in the first innings. And that's a bit of a concern going forward with Mitchell Marsh. Plus his form with the bat as well. You really want your all-rounder bowling some overs as well. And considering that Australia bowled a lot of overs on this final day of this test match, going into the Sydney test where there's a short turnaround of a few days, people will start to raise those points about Mitchell Marsh. So that's a major talking point from Australia's bowling, is about Mitchell Marsh not bowling overs. But apart from that, I think Australia will be very pleased with the way they went, especially in the second innings. At one stage, when Pant and Jaiswal were batting, went wicketless in that second session, you thought, okay, this game's going to peter out to a draw. And it looked like that. It felt like that. It felt like it was going to be a draw. But obviously when Travis Head came on, got that wicket of Pant, then the Australian bowlers clicked and said, you know what, this is the time to go full out attack. Let's take these wickets and let's win this test match. And that's what they did. And you can't give Australia a sniff, otherwise they'll take it. And they certainly took the opportunity. You can't give opportunities to the opposition in these types of situations. And unfortunately for India, that's what they did. Pant getting out the way he did, pretty much gave the opportunity for Australia to really take these wickets and win this test match, which was a superb effort by all. And I think Australia will be very pleased with their overall performance in this test match. The batters stood up. They showed a lot of fight. The bowlers stuck in on this pitch that didn't really offer much at times for the bowlers. They stuck in. They got wickets. It was a great team performance. Everyone played their role. And that's the important thing in cricket, is that everyone needs to play their role, batters, bowlers, and in the field. And that's certainly what Australia did in this test match. And that's why they're leading this series 2-1. So that's Australia's team performance overall in this fourth test across with their batting and bowling. And it was a pretty good performance by Australia. Let's move on and talk about India's performance in this fourth test and talk about where it went wrong, because there was a lot of things that they could have done better. So we'll have a bit of talk about that. India will be disappointed. It was a test match that they should have drawn, I should say. But that batting collapse on the final day, losing 7 for 34 in the last session on day 5 in 28.3 overs, was pretty much the killer blow, really. It was pretty much the killer blow, and that was the end of the chances of India drawing this test match and going on to have a chance of winning this series and reclaiming the Border-Gavaskar Trophy. So they're under the pump now. They're trailing 2-1 in the series. There's a lot of pressure on them. Sort of lost their way in that second innings, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, let's talk about their batting and talk about how they went about their business. In the first innings, they were able to get up to 369. They were in a bit of trouble at one stage. They were 7 for 221 in the first innings. In a bit of trouble, looking like conceding a big deficit in the first innings, maybe over 200 runs at one stage. But they soon recovered to 369 all out, just trailing by 105 runs. It was a big partnership between Kumar Reddy, who scored a fantastic 100, and Sundar adding 127 for the 8th wicket. That pretty much got India back within this test match and not conceding a big deficit. At one stage, it looked like that was the case. India were batting so well at the start of their first innings. There was a really good partnership between Kohli and Jaiswal. 102 for the 3rd wicket. There were 2 for 153 at that stage, and then that partnership was going along nicely. And then the run out with Jaiswal and Kohli, the incident there, and that pretty much sparked a batting collapse for India. They lost a few wickets after that. Kohli got out after Jaiswal was run out, and then they lost a few wickets after that. And their innings was in a bit of a jam. But that partnership between Kumar Reddy and Sundar, as I mentioned, got India back on track. The second innings, obviously 340 runs to win on the last day, was going to be a tough ask for India, really, especially on the last day of the test match, day 5, where the pitch is starting to play some tricks a little bit. But this pitch here in Melbourne didn't do that, but it was a tough ask nonetheless. To score 340 runs across 3 sessions on the last day was always going to be difficult. They lost 3 early wickets in the first session. Obviously, Rohit Sharma, KL Rahul, Kohli gone, 3 for 33 at lunch, and then they went through the second session wicketless. Pant and Jaiswal put on a good partnership of 88 for the 4th wicket. There were 3 for 112 at T India. So with the way that they were scoring, you would probably think that India were, probably going to bat out a draw. It was looking like that. Nothing was really happening. The game was sort of in a holding pattern. Both teams sort of resigned to the fact that this game was probably going to be ending in a draw and going to Sydney 1-1. But then carnage happened in the last session. And then India had a batting collapse, lost 7 for 34 in 28.3 overs. Rishabh Pant caused the batting collapse. He took on a long hop from Travis Head, and he held out to Mitchell Marsh at deep long on. And that pretty much sparked the batting collapse for India. And that's where this test match turned in Australia's favour. And Australia were able to win this test match and pull off what was a remarkable victory, whereas everyone resigned to the fact that this test match was probably going to end in a draw. So that's pretty much what happened for India in terms of the batting side of things. Talking points from India's batting. Kumar Reddy, what 100 for Nitish Kumar Reddy. 114 he scored in the first innings. Remarkable scenes there. At one stage, it looked like he was going to be out. He was going to be stranded, 99 not out. Wickets were losing. Wickets were being taken at the other end, and Kumar Reddy was certainly going to be stranded on 99 not out. But he was able to score the 100. It was a fantastic moment for him to score his debut 100 in Test cricket, his first one in his Test career. To do it in front of a big crowd at the MCG, Boxing Day, obviously that's the stuff of dreams, isn't it? And to do it in front of his parents, and it was a wonderful moment with his father in the crowd in tears. His father sacrificed a lot for Kumar Reddy in terms of his cricket career, wanting him to pursue his career to be a cricketer. And you could see what it means. That's what the game of cricket is about. Your parents sacrificing a lot to, make sure that you're able to reach your dreams and aspirations. And that's what Kumar Reddy did in this 100. It was a superb 100. He's been one of India's best batters in the series. But up until this test match in Melbourne, he wasn't able to score that big score. He scored a few 40s, and he looked pretty good at the crease. He was batting with the tail in most of those innings. But in this test match, he batted with Sundar in that partnership, and he was able to get that 100. A superb moment for him. Definitely it was. Hopefully many more for Kumar Reddy going forward. Washington Sundar was pretty good. Scored a half century and batted pretty well with Kumar Reddy in that partnership. He batted pretty well. Rohit Sharma's form slump continues. Again, 2 low scores and both ordinary dismissals. The first innings, attempting to play a pull shot and got out to Pat Cummins. The second innings, he got out to Pat Cummins again, trying to whip a ball through the leg side, got a leading edge, and it went straight to Mitchell Marsh in the gully, which was a pretty good catch. Pressure on Rohit Sharma. He's in the firing line after what happened in this test match. Captaincy is under pressure. There was a few heated arguments at stages throughout this test match with Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli and Gautam Gambhir, I should say. There was a few heated arguments with them across this test match. So that just shows that there's a lot of pressure in the Indian camp in terms of the dressing room. And there's a lot of pressure on Rohit Sharma at the moment in terms of his future as captain of India, but also future as a test player as well. So there is speculation that he could possibly retire maybe after Sydney. We don't know. Probably the same with Virat Kohli as well. They had two ordinary test matches, it had to be said. But Rohit Sharma definitely under pressure. We saw that in the field, definitely animated at times during the fielding performances by India across the first and second innings. He was pretty animated. He was pretty fiery. It just shows that he's under pressure. And when you're not scoring runs as a batter, but also the team's not performing well from a captaincy point of view, you are going to be under pressure. There's a lot of people in the media. There's a lot of people in terms of Indian fans and cricket fans around India that are calling for him to resign and retire. It's a very difficult place to be in at the moment for Rohit Sharma. But both innings here in Melbourne, along with the other results in the series from Brisbane to Adelaide and obviously here, he is definitely under pressure going into Sydney, no doubt about that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Rohit Sharma going into the Sydney test of this series. Virat Kohli, under pressure himself again, looked good in the first innings, but until that run out of Jaiswal, he got out soon after that. He got out nicking outside off stump again in the series. And then in the second innings, he got out nicking outside off stump again, this time to Mitchell Starc just before lunch. And that was a very important moment in the test match. The incident with Sam Constance, where he did the bit of a shoulder charge towards him. He got fined by the match referee and his match fee was taken out of his pay. He got a fine for that. A lot of people said he should have got probably a stronger punishment, maybe a suspension, but in the end it was a fine. Obviously, that incident with Constance and then what happened to him at the airport before this fourth test in Melbourne with his family, of course, with the media. So Virat Kohli, it wasn't a great week for him. And he's certainly under pressure as well. So that 100 he scored in Perth is a distant memory. And since the 100 in Perth, he hasn't been at his best, obviously. He's under pressure along with Rohit Sharma to obviously retire and go away gracefully. But yeah, it is definitely, crunch point now for Virat Kohli. It's definitely getting to that stage with him and Rohit Sharma where you are under pressure constantly. You're not scoring runs. You're not having the input that you once had. It is definitely, definitely getting towards that stage now where, probably retirement is probably closer than it is. So Virat Kohli, very tough test match, obviously, with the incidences that happened before the test match with his family and the media. Obviously, the Sam Constance issue, getting out in a similar way again, outside off stump, nicking off in both innings here. He's definitely under pressure, Virat Kohli. No doubt about that. Rishabh Pant had a pretty ordinary test match, probably a test match to probably forget for Rishabh Pant. Had a couple of brain fades. We'll start with the first innings, trying to lap Scott Boland on 2 consecutive deliveries. And that pretty much created some controversy in terms of him playing those types of shots. We know with Rishabh Pant, he is an aggressive type player. He is going to be this sort of cricketer where, he's going to play amazing shots and then get out in an ordinary fashion. But in the first innings, he tried to play the lap shot. He played and missed the first lap shot, got hit on the body off Scott Boland. Then the second one, he connected, hit it straight up in the air and got out at third man, caught by Nathan Lyon off Scott Boland. And in the situation of the game there in the first innings, it was a very important moment in the game for India in terms of their first innings. Obviously, they were struggling at that stage when he got out. And that was probably not the right option to play at the time. The second innings is where people are really having a go at Rishabh Pant in terms of the game situation. Obviously, with India trying to bat for a draw, he batted so well, Rishabh Pant, with Jaiswal. In that partnership, the second session on day 5, both of them batted so well in that second session, not losing a wicket and sort of creating the narrative of this game is going to end in a draw because Australia went wicketless in the second session. Rishabh Pant did very well to restrain himself, along with Jaiswal in that partnership. And then in the last session, that's where the game flipped on its head. And he got out to Travis Head. He took on a long hop. The MCG is quite a big ground, and you've got to hit it well for 6. He didn't do that. He hit it straight up in the air, and it got caught by Mitchell Marsh at wide long on. And India went on to lose 7 for 34 in 28.3 overs. And that's where the test match turned in Australia's favour. So I think Rishabh Pant, he did so well to fight fight through the urges and resist the temptation to take on the big shot. But in both innings, in terms of the match situation, that's where a lot of people are criticizing him for that. And probably rightly so, because as a player, you have to recognize the game situation. And the game situation in the second innings was, what does the team require me to do here? The team requires me to bat for a draw because we're not going to chase down the runs. It would have been an extraordinary thing if we did chase down the runs. It would have been a great thing to witness, but it was never going to happen. So I'm just going to bat for a draw. Let's try and save the test match, go to Sydney 1-1. And he had a bit of a brain fade, Rishabh Pant. And that is the disappointing factor. And I think most people would say that's a bit reckless. And it probably was, really. You've got to recognize the match situation. And for Rishabh Pant, he's a very good player. He's a very talented player. But sometimes he probably needs to realize when's the right time to be aggressive and when's the right time just to, go back in the gears and just settle down and play the game situation. That's what you need to do. And he didn't quite do that in this test match. Jaiswal, both innings he played pretty well, 82 and 84 respectively. Obviously got run out in the first innings. You could say it was probably his own fault, maybe Virat Kohli's fault. Depends how you see it from your different perspective. I think both of them were at fault in terms of that run out. Lack of communication, and probably there was never a run in it. You didn't need to take a risky single at that stage. Both of them were batting so well in the partnership. You didn't need to take a risky single like that. But anyway, got run out, and that was the end of his innings. The second innings, he was such a big batter in terms of the second innings for India because he needed to bat all the way through if India were going to draw the test match. He played a hook shot down the leg side, a short delivery from Pat Cummins, down the leg side, caught up with it. And apparently, from all the discussion in terms of the decision that was given, there was some sort of deviation off the face of the bat. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about this. Obviously, Snicko didn't pick up anything and all this stuff, and the third umpire went for what he saw on the visuals. But that was a big moment in the game in terms of Jaiswal losing his wicket. And probably the same with Rishabh Pant in terms of Jaiswal, in terms of recognizing the game situation. The runs weren't going to happen. Just bat normally. Let it go down the leg side. It was a ball that was short down the leg side. The only way you're going to get out is by catching up with it with the bat, which did happen to Jaiswal in the end. He wanted to take it on, but you could have just left it. Recognize the game situation. We're going to bat for a draw. The runs are irrelevant. The runs don't matter. What matters is that we bat time. And he's only young, Jaiswal. He's in his early 20s. He's a very promising player. But just like with Rishabh Pant, it's about recognizing key moments and match situation. And it's all about just recognizing, what do you need to do? What does the team require me to do in this situation? And that was to bat for a draw. And they could have done that, India. But Pant got out, the batting collapsed, Jaiswal lost his head a little bit. I think when Rishabh Pant got out, Jaiswal just lost the plot a little bit. He was flashing at balls wide and outside off stump, and obviously the wicket delivery, trying to pull Pat Cummins down the leg side or hook it with short ball down the leg side, which brought about the end of his innings. So if India look back on this batting performance, especially in the second innings, they will be disappointed in the way that Rishabh Pant, Jaiswal went about it in terms of the match situation, trying to bat out for a draw. Both of them looked pretty set. Both of them made double figures. Everyone else succumbed to the pressure. And that's what happens because they opened the door for Australia and the other batters coming in felt the pressure and lost their wickets because of that. It was just mainly because of pressure. And that's what happens when you're trying to save a test match and you lose a few wickets like that, like India did. It's going to cost you, and that's what it did. So I think they'll be bitterly disappointed about that, India, with their batting, no doubt, and they should be. It was an opportunity for them to try and draw this game, but unfortunately that didn't happen, and they've got to work on that going into Sydney. The bowling performance for for India. Let's talk about that quickly in terms of the bowling side of things for India. I thought they bowled pretty well in the second innings, India. The first innings, they bowled okay, but there was one guy again that did all the job, did all the bowling, I should say, and did all the damage, I should have said, and that was Jasprit Bumrah. Not a surprise. He got India back into this test match single-handedly, got them back into this test match, especially in the second innings. But bowled Australia out for 474 in the first innings. That was a pretty disappointing result. Conceding 400 runs in the first innings is never a good thing. But in the second innings, they did well to claw it back. Bumrah, especially getting India back into the test match, he took 3 wickets for 4 in that short spell that he bowled. Australia lost 4 for 11 pretty quickly in 21 balls in that batting collapse. Australia was 6 for 91, had a lead of 196. It could have gone either way, but those key partnerships between Labuschagne and Cummins for the 7th wicket, Lyon and Boland for the 10th wicket, pretty much got Australia to that lead of 339, and that's where the test match turned again in Australia's favour. But, Bumrah tried his best to get India back into the test match, and he nearly did with that bowling performance. Talking points about India's bowling, some talking points from their performance. Bumrah, what can you say about Jasprit Bumrah? He continues to do it. What a bowler he is. 200 test wickets and an average of 20 is pretty remarkable in test match cricket. Not a lot of bowlers have done that. There's been a few that have done that, and Bumrah is one of them. Incredible spell in that second innings. Taking 3 for 4, getting India back into the test match, giving them an outside chance of winning the test match. And, you got to feel for the guy. You got to feel for him. He hasn't had much bowling support in the series. He's bowled a lot of overs in the series. He bowled a lot of overs in this test match again. He took 4 wickets in the first innings. He took 5 in the second innings. He took 9 wickets for the match. You got to feel for him. And you could see towards the end of day 4, when he bowled that final over on day 4, he got the edge of Nathan Lyon, but it was a no ball. And he was pretty disappointed about that. But you could see on his face a bowler that was pretty much drained. I think he had enough. And I don't blame him, where you are the one guy that is carrying this bowling attack. There's not much support that he has had throughout this whole entire series, but you could see on his face that he was absolutely spent. He was pretty much running on empty, really, and that's the thing. He is the guy to make things happen with the ball for India. I suppose in the second innings he got support from Siraj and Deep. Kumar Reddy and Sundar and Jadeja didn't bowl much in probably in either innings. But, for Bumrah, he did get that support in the second innings. But apart from that, from the other test matches in the series, he hasn't got that support. He's taken over 20 wickets in the series. It's remarkable. Just the way that he goes about his business is superb. You got to feel for Bumrah. You got to feel for him now, especially when India went down in this test match. There was a chance for India to draw the test match, but that didn't happen, obviously, as we've already discussed. But you got to feel for him. He tried to get India back into the test. He clawed India back to give themselves an outside chance of winning the test. And then obviously all hell broke loose in that last session on day 5. But you got to feel for him. And, it will be interesting to see how he bounces back in Sydney in terms of his bowling efforts, because it's a short turnaround between this test in Melbourne and Sydney. Only a few days break. So, for Bumrah, he's, done very well to play 4 test matches and to bowl as many overs as he did, to, do the job for India. But, a very brilliant bowling performance from Bumrah. But unfortunately, it wasn't the result that India wanted in the end. So probably his bowling performance has gone in vain because they lost this test match. So that's the same problem with India. as it has been throughout the whole entire series, is that Bumrah can't do it alone. He's got to have other support from Deep, Siraj, Sundar, Reddy, and Jadeja, which he did in this test match, but they've got to give more. You just can't let Bumrah do it all on his own, because he's only human at the end of the day. And, as we saw towards the end of day 4 of this test match, when he bowled that final over, he did look spent. He did look tired. He looked pretty drained, and you got to feel for him. You got to feel for him, because he's bowling his heart out, but unfortunately he hasn't got that support, and that's a concern for India. So they need that support going into Sydney for Bumrah if they can provide it. We shall see what happens there. But India overall, again, disappointed with the result. It was a test match that they should have drawn, but they weren't able to do it because of the pressure, and they allowed Australia to take the opportunity when it presented itself. They crumbled under the pressure, and they weren't able to hold off Australia, and they lost those wickets, and they were bowled out, and Australia won the test match. So India will be disappointed. They're under pressure now going into Sydney. There's a lot of work to do. Can they bounce back? That will be the thing going into Sydney. Can they bounce back from this? Has the morale taken a bit of a hit? It probably has, because, the way they lost this test match, it has certainly taken a hit. But we shall see what happens in Sydney in terms of India. But they'll be very disappointed with their performance. But I suppose they got some positives from the test match. Kumar Reddy, Sundar with the bat, Bumrah with the ball, Jaiswal as well. So there's some positives. But the negatives were that the batting really failed in the second innings trying to save this test match. And they'll be bitterly disappointed about that. Now then, let's talk about the 5th test of this series, and it'll be at the SCG. And let's preview the 5th test of the series at the SCG between Australia and India. Talk about the last test of the series and what's going to happen, and in terms of changes to both teams in terms of their 11. Now, let's have a look at the stats between Australia and India at the SCG. First test match between the two countries was back in 1947. 13 matches, 7 draws. Australia won 5. India have won 1 test match at the SCG. The last 2 results at the SCG between Australia and India, back in 2018-19 and 2020-21, both matches have ended in a draw. So the last 2 results at the SCG, the last 2 series between Australia and India, both test matches have ended in a draw, and could be a possibility for this test match here at the SCG. What we do know in Sydney, that there is rain forecast towards the back end of the test. And that's sort of surprised in Sydney, that it always rains this time of year in January in Sydney. So that could be the 3rd draw in a row between Australia and India in test matches at the SCG. But let's hope the weather holds, because we want to see some test cricket. But let's talk about both teams in terms of their prospects of this test match here at the SCG in terms of winning it. Obviously, Australia, they'll be buoyant by the win here in Melbourne. They'll be pretty happy to lead 2-1. They've got the advantage. So if it does rain in Sydney, the game ends in a draw, which is a possibility. Can't rule that out. Australia do win the series and do reclaim the Border-Gavaskar Trophy. Australia will obviously want to win the test match, of course. I think a 3-1 series scoreline sounds better than 2-1. Also, you've got to think about the World Test Championship as well. If Australia win either this test match against India or the 2 test matches against Sri Lanka, one of them, they qualify for the World Test Championship final, which will be against South Africa, because they've already qualified for that, South Africa. There was a pretty good win over Pakistan to do that in that test match at Centurion recently. So they do have that to play for, Australia. Now, in terms of changes to the 11, there could be possibly 2 changes if they consider them. Obviously, the main concern is Mitchell Starc. He had a bit of a niggle with his back. He was grabbing at his back throughout this test match in Melbourne. He was able to bowl through that, which is a good sign. He was able to push through that. It is a short turnaround of a few days, but in terms of the series and where the series is at, I think he would like to play this last test match, Mitchell Starc. He knows his body better than anyone else, obviously. So if he was able to get through the test match here in Melbourne, he was able to bowl, his speeds were pretty good, then he may be a chance to play in Sydney. We shall wait and see. But if he isn't, possibly a change there. Maybe Jai Richardson, he's in the squad already. He may take the place of Mitchell Starc, but we shall see what happens there with Mitchell Starc. The other one is Mitchell Marsh. In terms of his form, not bowling many overs, the runs have dried up with the bat. Maybe Australia may give him one more chance. We shall see, but he certainly needs to do a bit more in this last test match, Mitchell Marsh, if selected. Bo Webster's in the squad as well. He's a very promising player, obviously done well for Tasmania recently in the Sheffield Shield, and obviously provides an all-round option with the bat and with the ball. He can bowl medium pace and spin. So he's definitely an option for Australia if Australia decide to get rid of Mitchell Marsh for the last test of the series, which is certainly what everyone is suggesting. But the Australian selectors may have a different plan with that. So Australia, in terms of their potential 11, they may keep the same 11. It depends on whether or not they think Mitchell Starc is ready to play in this last test in terms of his fitness, and whether or not they want to change Mitchell Marsh and get in someone else like a Bo Webster or something. So there may be possibly two changes, but if either of those scenarios play out the way they do, then you would think some changes will be needed. But if not, then you would think Marsh and probably Starc will retain their spots. So Australia's potential 11 could be Constas, Khawaja, Labuschagne, Smith, Head, Mitchell Marsh, Carey, Cummins, Starc, Lyon and Boland. On the other hand, for India, let's talk about them. They're under pressure, going 2-1 down after this loss in Melbourne. They need to win this last test match to draw the series and to retain the Border-Gavaskar Trophy, which is not going to be an easy task. Shubman Gill was left out of the test match in Melbourne because India went with a double spin option and to strengthen their batting with Jadeja and Sundar, but that does sacrifice their bowling a bit in terms of a specialist bowler. In terms of the pace department, we certainly saw that in this test match. It was exposed. Talk about Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli probably missing out in terms of speculation about their future and possibly retirements. I don't think that will be the case. I think both Rohit Sharma and Kohli will probably play in the last test. I don't think you want to change the captain in the last test of the series. I think both of them probably should play the whole entire series, and then what happens after that will happen in terms of their future. Will Shubman Gill be considered? Do they want to keep the same 11 in terms of the strength of their batting, knowing that we need to strengthen our batting a little bit at the lower order because of what happened here in Melbourne? So plenty of selection questions to ask for India, but they could possibly keep the same 11. There was some concern about Akashdeep. He had a bit of a back problem. He was off the field at times in this test match getting treatment. Maybe they could bring in another replacement for him, maybe Rana or maybe Krishna. Depends whether or not Deep is available and fit. So they may make a change. They may bring back Shubman Gill, possibly, maybe. I don't think they will probably consider that, but who knows? You know, it's going to be a crucial selection for India, no doubt. But possibly their potential 11 could be the same 11 that they had in Melbourne. So, you know, probably Jaiswal, Rohit Sharma, Rahul, Kohli, Pant, Jadeja, Kumar Reddy, Sundar, Deep, Bumrah and Siraj. We'll have to wait and see what happens in terms of the selections for India in this last test of the series. But it's definitely important in the context of trying to draw the series, trying to get the selections right. There was a lot of criticism about, Shubman Gill not playing this fourth test in Melbourne. But we shall wait and see what happens come the fifth test in Sydney. Now then, some final thoughts to end our review of this fourth test of this Border-Gavaskar Trophy between Australia and India. Some final thoughts from the fourth test. What a test match we have witnessed at the MCG. Over the 5 days, the cricket was enthralling, and it went down to the final day, final session, and last hour, and both teams put on a great show. This victory will go down as one of Australia's greatest ever test match wins. They have banished the demons of the SCG and the Gabba from the 2020-21 Border-Gavaskar Trophy, where they couldn't finish off the job, and that's been put to rest here at the MCG, where they were able to get the job done and secure victory. For India, this will be a disappointing result, and now going into Sydney, they need to win if they are to retain the Border-Gavaskar Trophy. But they can take some positives from this test match. Kumar Reddy's century, Bumrah's outstanding bowling performance, and Jaiswal showcasing his batting talents. Going into the fifth and final test of this series, Australia are in the box seat with a 2-1 series lead. A win or a draw would secure the Border-Gavaskar Trophy for Australia for the first time since 2014-15. On the other hand, for India, they are under pressure in a game where they should have drawn here at the MCG to now needing to win in Sydney to keep their Border-Gavaskar Trophy dominance over Australia. This MCG test of 2024-25 between Australia and India will go down as one of the greatest to be played at the MCG. A record attendance of 373,691 across the 5 days showed that Test cricket is well and truly alive and well. Both teams should be proud of their efforts in this Test match. And no doubt they should be. Both teams should be proud of their efforts in this Test match because they provided some spectacular cricket over the 5 days of this fourth Test at the MCG. Thanks, everyone, for listening to our fourth test review of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy between Australia and India. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on this fourth test of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy between Australia and India in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.